unfortunately, I mean, for us, a lot of times our guests will come on and they'll have their wine with them while we discuss whatever it is what we're going to discuss. But a lot of time we'll cover lighter issues as well, so it's not always heavy. It's not always heavy, So that happens occasionally. All right, Knight.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Real Brothers for the real world. I'm TL, and that's my man Stace. And we have a special guest tonight. Elie Mystal, contributor of a contributor to MSNBC.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He has a degree from Harvard, law degree from Harvard.
Right.
And we are going to be talking about his new book, Allow Me to Retort, which you can barely find on shelves anymore, from what I hear. And just want to say that this is a good book. It didn't make the New York Times best-selling list for no reason.
That's right.
I haven't finished, I haven't finished all of it. As you can see, I'm a little bit more than, I got like 1/5 of the book left to finish because, we don't have a production staff that reads and gives us cliff notes.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
But yeah.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the weekly podcast, Real Brothers of the Real Bird, Real Brothers of the Real World. This is our digital neighborhood. And as TL said, we're joined today by Elie Mystal. We're going to discuss his book. And if you have questions that you'd like us to add to the conversation, feel free to submit them. And if time permitting, we'll try to get those in as well. So Elie, once again, thank you for joining us. This is a big treat. We just saw you on MSNBC. And Terry and I popped on, talked about, we were nervous. You said, I hope he doesn't trade us.
I was like,
MSNBC, so we're glad you were able to make it.
Yeah. Stace, TL, thank you guys so much for having me. One correction to my bio. I am not a contributor to MSNBC. The contributors get paid money. I do it. I am gratis over there. I do it for the fame.
Okay.
Do it for the people.
Okay. Now,
right.
Elie,
well, that works too.
The question I was about to ask before we delve into Allow Me to Retort, how are you enjoying the whirlwind that we've seen you on The View? I've seen you on a few podcasts. We see you consistently on MSNBC. How are you enjoying this notoriety regarding this book? How are you enjoying it?
It's a little bit surprising. It's a little bit bracing. I did not expect some of the statements that I've been making to be so controversial. When I said on The View that the Constitution is kind of trash, that kind of started right-wing media, white-wing media.
Right, everybody.
Did you just say white-wing media?
White-wing media coming after me. Because that's what they are. I mean, it's not... Right. I mean, that's who they're talking to, right? And I was a little bit surprised about that because it's so obviously not a good document, right? Like, it's not like if you go to law school, if you learn about this stuff, it is not a controversial position to say that the Constitution as written was not good. And certainly needed some immediate updates, and then even after these updates, it remains to be a deeply flawed document. That's not breaking news to people. So having the right wing pushback has been a little bit like, have y'all read it?
Right.
Like, have you actually read this Constitution that you're kind of defending and calling me the crazy person for attacking? Have you actually read this document?
Right.
Because if you read it kind of line by line, you'll find a lot of stuff that's stupid. And maybe you just haven't thought about it deeply enough to understand that. So that's been a little bit bracing. But other than that, you can already see, like, I'm kind of a wind-up doll. You wind me up, I go.
Let you go.
The first time I heard you say that was in, I think, 2016, I believe. You were debating somebody, and I was like, whoa, what he said that the Constitution is messed up, and I'm like, and then once you gave like all of the reasoning behind it, I was like, yo, this dude is pretty sharp. So then, that's when, I started to see you on different shows and everything. And I was like, yeah, this is somebody I can get behind. You know what I mean? As far as,
So what does it say to you? What does it say to you? The fact that, as you called it, the white wing media is responding the way that they are. What does it say to you? What does it say about where we are as a country that they're so up in arms regarding your that statement?
Yeah, well, part of it is that they're only in it for the culture war, right? There's no intellectualism on that side. There's no kind of desire to have a real debate or have a real kind of examination of our issues as a country. They're not in it for that. They're in it for the culture war. And I attacked something that they have determined into a cultural hero, right? Like these people have acted like the Constitution was written in stone, right? By the finger of God up on the mountain, and then Moses brought it down and gave it to them. And it's not at all what happened, but that's how they've decided to pretend that the document was created. The other thing that you kind of notice, the reason I'm saying the Constitution isn't great because it upholds and supports enduring white male supremacy.
Right, because it was written by white males for other white males, right? I mean,
it was written by white males for white males so that white males would never be alone, right?
Right, and these white males were enslavers, they were slave owners, and also colonists. And some imperialists and the whole nine, right?
And some of them were abolitionists who were nonetheless willing to make deals with slavers and colonists and imperialists, right?
Well,
I wouldn't have made the deal if you had asked me.
Right.
Yeah. Do you want to get away from King George? Yes. Do you want to get away from King George by having some slaves? No.
Right. Now, that which leads us to my first question, which is probably the most controversial thing that you said. You said that the document is trash and should be trashed and basically rewritten. Am I right with that?
I don't quite go so far as to being rewritten, because the problem I have with rewriting it in the modern context is that if we try to do it now, given our current politics, given where right-wing media is, given what white supremacists want, for the most part, we would build back in the same kind of racial and misogynist problems that we have in the original document, right? So if you had a new constitutional convention, who gets to pick the delegates?
Right.
And what states do they come? Do we have every state gets the same amount of delegates? Again, that's dumb.
Right.
If Wyoming gets one delegate, then California should get 58 delegates.
Right.
Are we going to have a constitutional convention like that? Or are we going to have a constitutional convention that once again overrepresents white people in the writing of the document? If we do that, we're going to have the same problems with the document. So I don't go so far as to say we need to rewrite the entire thing. I'm just saying that we need to massively reinterpret it so that it works in a fair, equal society with justice and fairness and equality for all, as opposed to what we've been doing for the past 250 years.
So how would the American people go about making such a change, such a drastic change, and make the document where it's inclusive of everyone?
Well, I think a lot of it can be done through interpretation, right? Like right now, we have a Supreme Court that considers itself the final arbiter on what is and is not constitutional, right? That, by the way, is not in the Constitution. That's something that the Supreme Court just made up for itself. It decided in 1803 that it would have the power of judicial review, which means it gets to tell Congress and the president what's constitutional and not. Okay, well, if that body has that power, then what I'm going to need is about 20 hard-hitting Supreme Court justices who agree with me. And if you give me a majority of Supreme Court justices that agree with my interpretation of the Constitution and agree with my interpretation of justice and fairness and equality and what that looks like, I can do a lot of good. And so that's one place where I start. We've had 115 Supreme Court justices in American history, about to be 116, and 108 of them have been white men. That's not good.
Right.
Now,
that's not acceptable.
The question that it leads me to then, and I heard you talking about this on one of the podcasts, if it is a living document, as you said earlier, it's not written in stone, and the way that it was written was to, as you said, to be a living document that can be adjusted and amended based on the current times, so that within itself keeps it current, or should. So with that being said, right, it should. So the question then that I have is the problem that we have has more to do with participation in the political arena more so than the document itself. Meaning, I'm listening.
I'm going to finish your question and then let me answer.
So if more people participated in politics and it was more of a representative republic, which is the way that it should, then those other voices and views would be heard and reflected and amended to this living document.
Right. My problem with that idea is that you can't out-organize racism, right? You can't out-organize structural limitations on the right to vote, right? We've had 4, people don't get this, we've had 4 constitutional amendments that's tried to expand the right to vote, right? We have the 15th Amendment, which means that you can't prohibit the right to vote because of race, color, or creed. The 19th Amendment gives the right to vote to women. The 17th Amendment allows for direct popular election of the senators. We still don't have direct popular election of the president. And the 24th Amendment eliminates the poll tax. Sorry, I forgot one. And the 26th Amendment lowers the voting age to 18, right? So we've had a bunch of opportunities to try to make our document more universal, to get towards universal suffrage. And yet, and still, white conservative people routinely deny the vote to people of color, make it harder for people of color to vote, and in some cases argue that they should be able to throw away votes of people of color full stop, right?
Because they don't want to relinquish that power.
When we talk about the Constitution being a living document, either the 15th Amendment means that what Republicans are doing today is unconstitutional, or our experiment is illegitimate. Right, pick one and tell me, but you can't have both, right? No. So I say that if one of the problems that we have, even with the amendment process, even with the process to make this document more relevant and more living and more kind of work in a modern era, if you allow conservatives to control the interpretation of that document, if you allow Republicans to control how that document's going to be interpreted on the Supreme Court in the modern day, then what you have is what we have right now, which with voter suppression, with gerrymandering, and with the systemic diminution of the black vote and the black voice in American politics that is very hard to out-organize, right?
Right, true. Terry, you had something?
Yeah, I want to get into the book a little bit, Elie. One of the chapters that was really interesting to me is why you can't punch a cop, right? I thought that some of the stuff in there was, very interesting and entertaining and informational. Those percentages that you referenced about the conviction, the rate of convictions for when white people kill black people, the disparity in that was like crazy.
Yeah.
So how can we get that issue along with the Fourth Amendment, changed?
Yeah, so let's bring everybody up to speed so we're all on the same page. What TL's talking about is, I say in the book, the laws around self-defense, like, defense of yourself against an attacker, are some of the most provably racist laws that we have statistics for. If you are a white person who shoots a black person in so-called self-defense, you are 254% more likely to have your shooting judged as a justifiable homicide than if you are a white person who shoots a white person. If you happen to be a white person who shoots a black person and claims self-defense in a stand your ground state, that's not even if you claim stand your ground. If you're just claiming self-defense in a state that has a stand your ground law, like think of George Zimmerman shooting Trayvon Martin. He didn't claim stand your ground in Florida. He claimed self-defense in a stand your ground state. Yet that white person is 350% more likely to have their homicide viewed as justified and escape prosecution from the law. That's
terrible.
But is that okay? So now
that's stronger than that, right? So what we have is a system of self-defense that is fundamentally and systemically racist against black bodies. TL was asking how we change that. Again, I say that you can stop a lot of this by changing a couple of cases. I have 3 cases in particular on the Supreme Court that I talk about in the book, changing the use of force, changing the stop and frisk laws, and changing qualified immunity. That would lessen the ability of cops to shoot us. But in terms of just the average white person on the street shooting and killing a black person that they claim self-defense in, that's a longer-term project in terms of really changing the jury structure and quite frankly changing the racist culture of this country.
And that, and I was going to get at that because see, and that's what I was going to get at, because TL and I, we talked about this one time before, and I tend to think that a lot of it is not so much as an issue with the written law. From my position, I thought it had more to do with the interpretation of it, because the law doesn't state black or white. But if you have, like you said, Zimmerman had a jury trial, right? Zimmerman had a jury. So if he had a jury of his peers,
of those laws.
Right, it's the application of it, right? So with that being said, again, if more people were, and I go, of course, when they choose the jury selection would have to be tightened up a bit. But if the jury selection was changed or adjusted, then
he has a part in his book that actually explains the jury selection process and how black people have always been taken out of that process by, I forget what the name of the term is. I guess
it's called the Preemptory challenge, right? So if you go to jury duty, as hopefully everybody should, it's one of the most important civic duties that you can do, and really one of the best ways to stop injustice from happening in the black community. Take your jury summons, go to jury duty if you can. It's one of really the most important things you can do as a citizen. In any event, you go to your jury summons, you get impaneled for a trial, and what happens is that both lawyers get to ask all the prospective jurors questions, right? And then based on their answers to those questions, the both lawyers have the opportunity to reject people from sitting on the actual jury. We call these rejections preemptory challenges. Turns out lawyers don't actually have to have a reason to reject you. They can reject you for any reason or no reason at all. There are very few rules governing preemptory challenges. It took a long time in this country for us to say that you couldn't reject somebody from the jury just because they were black. When I say a long time, I mean it wasn't until 1986.
Wow.
1986, the Challenger exploded. It wasn't until the Challenger exploded that we had a case that said you couldn't reject jurors just because they were black, and if you did, there would be some process to see if that was legitimate or not, right? So that was called Batson v. Kentucky, and it's a huge case. It's a really important case. But at the end of the day, even after this case in 1986, the way the court decided it was that you can't reject somebody just because they're black. But if you have a legitimate non-racial reason, then you can still reject black jurors. And boy, let me tell you about some non-racial reasons that people have come up with, right? They've said that they've rejected jurors because they look like the defendant, because they have similar hair. Like all of these racist tropes have been used to still reject black jurors, which is why in many counties, even though the county itself might be diverse, you'll have a jury of almost entirely white people,
and that's still happening today, right?
And look, think about the Ahmaud Arbery killing in Georgia. They had an all-white jury. All-white jury finally did the right thing, thank God. But they still had an all-white jury by rejecting the 4 black jurors that showed up in the town. Right, that should be unconstitutional.
And the black public wasn't sure that they would even.
It's not.
Right. And the black public wasn't even sure that they would even, convict those people. You know what I mean? Because it was a doubt in my mind. I'm like,
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure.
No one was 100%. It's almost like we've been down that road before, so no one can be confident that decision is going to go, quote unquote, the right way. I have a question then. So with that being said, Elie, as you just mentioned that in that case with Arbery, a white jury convicted, an all-white jury convicted those defendants. So the question is, and this can also go back to when you're talking about the Constitution and participation. As the country browns and more people of color get involved, and you have, and even some white folk become a little bit, and I hate to use the word, but kind of wake up a little bit. Does that change and browning within itself also have a positive effect on the way laws are written? So I'm asking, as the country changes and browns, does that also give you any hope that things will get better?
Well, when it comes to criminal justice, not unless you have a camera phone, right? Like, I just pray to God, if they get me, that I get that there's a surveillance camera somewhere, right? Because what we have seen in our country is that white people won't even pretend to listen to you unless there's video. Like, the video doesn't mean that white people will do the right thing, but they won't even think about doing the right thing unless there's actual video of them getting you, of them killing you. Without the video, they don't even want to hear about it, right?
And the thing is that they have been doing this for years. The smartphone is what actually has taken our movement, or our the
cops aren't killing more of us. The cops are being caught more, us,
right?
Just like they've always been, because of the smartphone, and also because what you also see, and I've written about this a lot, not in this book, but I've written about this a lot on The Nation in my columns. Just the idea that the mainstream press still will report a police report as if it is true.
Right.
When time and time again, we see that the initial police report is nothing but a pack of lies. Nothing but straight up lies made by the cops to make themselves look bad. The police report in the Breonna Taylor situation, that was a complete lie. The police report in the Ahmaud Arbery case, that was a complete lie. The police report in the Derek Chauvin case, that was a complete lie. The video exposes the lie a lot of the times, but there's still media that will just publish, and there's still people that will believe a police report. Think about how many of our people, how many of our ancestors have been put in jail behind some false thing on the police report, and they've complained about it, and nobody believed them.
Trust me, I know.
Even their friends and family didn't believe them. Right? How many black people have gone to jail? How many black people have gone to death row?
How many have
just some lying cops?
Absolutely,
and it's still happening today unless you get a police report. So
shouldn't there be a law? Shouldn't there be a law?
The consequences. There definitely need to be consequences.
That the police shouldn't be able to lie with impunity.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's
like,
if they're caught
immunity. Lying, or if it was proven that their statement is false, there should be some kind of reprimand, or there should be something to make them accountable.
I agree, but again, I can't make that happen unless you give me at least 5 Supreme Court justices who agree with me as well. Like, I make the claim in my book, I make the argument in my book that we should move to a reasonable in fact standard, right? So like right now for police use of deadly force, it comes from a case called Graham v. Conner. That's when the cops beat the crap out of a black diabetic man. The conservatives on the Supreme Court said beating the crap out of this man was a reasonable use of force, and they changed the term to be reasonable according to another cop on the scene, right? So cops only have to be as reasonable as the next cop. I think that's ridiculous, right? It's like saying like my dog only has to be as reasonable as the next dog. Like what? No, I don't think that's a great standard, right? So I would like to see what's called a reasonable in fact standard. That means if the cop thinks I have a gun, I better have a gun.
Especially if he shot you.
Have a gun and shoots me, I better have a gun. If I have a wallet, or
that should be a consequence, or
a pick in my hair, that cop goes to jail.
Agreed.
Not pass go, does not collect $200. It would be a strict liability. You shot him, you were wrong, you're in jail. We're done here, right? So that would be now cops, police unions. They'll say, well, Elie, if you that might make us hesitate.
No.
Yes. I want you to hesitate before you shoot me. I don't think that's
That's it. Yeah. Is that right? I was about to just say that. Is that a lot to ask? I mean, just Give me
I
a
want you to
second.
stop and think. I want you to be sure you have to kill me before you kill me.
So now, let me ask you this then. So, they with the anti-lynching bill just went through, right? Just went through, and we see gradual changes happening, and even going back to when we talk about white folk not believing you unless they see video. Again, the gradual changes that we see taking place, though, is it is not fast enough, or what are your thoughts on that? Because we see things changing, and now we even have, there's some white folk out there that are on the lines
It's not
and
change.
marching, and
That's appeasement. There's a difference.
I mean, but it's changed nonetheless. It's changed nonetheless. What are your thoughts?
Are we seeing changes? I'm still waiting for my George Floyd prize. I'm still waiting for my Michael Brown prize. We had Black people out in the streets for an entire summer during a pandemic, demanding immediate redress of our issues, demanding justice now. And what law did the federal government pass?
Federal.
Zero.
Okay.
George Floyd policing. Joe Biden would be retired in Delaware if it wasn't for Black people.
That's right.
But where is the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act? It is dead in the water and in the Senate, right? Now, part of this I address in the book, part of this is part of the problem is federalism.
Correct.
Federalism is the idea that instead of one big country, we have 50 independent states, whatever.
Right.
Now, look, this is something that I always try to tell, especially younger Black people just getting into understanding the law and things like that. Whenever you hear states' rights, whenever you hear the argument states' rights, you should think about it as the exact argument that the slavers made. That states' right argument, it comes from the slavers who wanted to protect slavery at the founding. It was enveloped. It was interpreted and emboldened by the former Confederacy when they couldn't deal with the idea not of ending slavery in the South, just stopping its expansion into the West. States' rights is always the last bastion of the slaver. And every time you hear that phrase, even if you're hearing it from
our dog whistle
on our side or is good or whatever, you should always have a heightened
what is he really talking about? What is he really saying? Right.
So when we talk about like federalism, when it comes to policing, understand we don't have one police system. We don't have 50 police systems. There are over 3,000 sheriff's offices in the United States of America. And each one of those offices, sheriff's offices or, police commissioner zones, right? And each one of those offices has a little bit of power and determination over the rules of when I can be shot to death, right? So literally the rules governing when I can be shot to death and whether or not I will be shot to death change on whether I'm in Manhattan or Hoboken or Trenton. And that is bonkers. Like that, that is, again, when I talk about the Constitution being kind of trash, that is a dumb system.
Right, true.
We should have
a baseline.
We should have a baseline of police accountability throughout our country below which no police force can fall. And then if some jurisdictions want to make even a higher standard, that would be fine too with me. So there's a lot of ways to think about reforming here, but one of the ways is to have the federal government really step in and establish some baseline rules, like the no chokehold thing, like a rule against no knock warrants. Now, Biden's done it for the FBI, and that's great. There are a lot of brothers out here being shot by Clarice Starling, but sure, it's great that he's done it for the FBI. At what point is he going to do it for the local cop on the street? Because that's my problem.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question, Ellie. And so Stacey, he always pointing out the incremental changes to me, and I'm always like, no, we've been waiting over 400 years. That's a little bit too incremental for me. So we have a thing. We have a thing called the Black Dollar Blackout that we're trying to do on June the 11th, which is the date that my son was murdered. And what we want to do is try to show the financial power of black people in this country. Because the bottom line is, no matter how much we protest, march, vote, the bottom line is that it's about money, right? And the only way that we can leverage our strength is to withhold our black dollars, because our black dollars are very important to this, not only just this economy, but the financial market. This country literally runs on the back of black people.
Absolutely. Now, I do agree with TL regarding the strength and the power of the black dollar. But when that little dig he put in, let me kind of give you my spin on it. He tried to sneak that in on me. He didn't think I was listening. A little shady. All right, but my response to that, Elie, is always that the way this country was built, and for any major decisions, I don't think that change be swift. I think that any change, especially when you talk about federal, you talk about changes at the federal level, they should be thought out, they should be pondered, they should be considered, and it takes time. I don't think that anyone should be able to go in, snap their fingers, and make a change, because while it might benefit you one time, now you might get someone in there like Trump, snap his fingers and make a drastic change and spin everything backwards overnight.
How much time do we need?
No. I mean, but again, as I said earlier, though, I get it, but I look at where we were versus where we are, and again, I just say that change, that type of change, as long as we're moving forward, that's what I'm looking at. As long as we're moving forward. So.
I got a couple of things here. One, let's interrogate this idea that we're moving forward, right? Because I know why you say that. I know why we don't want to denigrate what progress has been made, right? We don't want to, my mom was born in 1950 in Mississippi, right? I've been to a family reunion where my mom had me, drink from a water fountain, and I was like, Mom, I'm like 9. I'm like, Mommy, I'm not thirsty. She's like, drink from this water fountain. I was like, okay. And I drank, and you can see they just scratched out the whites only, right? Wow. And so, like, for my mom, it was this big thing of having her kid drink from the water fountain that she wasn't herself allowed to drink out of when she was a kid, right? So there's progress. I'm not trying to denigrate the idea
movement, but
there's been progress. However, all right, let's look at it in broad strokes. I said already on this program, the 15th Amendment is what should give everybody the right to vote. The 19th Amendment is what gave women the right to vote. Now, the 19th Amendment didn't mean anything for black women, and the 15th Amendment didn't mean anything for black men until the 1965 Voting Rights Act. That's my pick for the most important piece of legislation in American history, because it's the 1965 Voting Rights Act that, for the first time, made America anything approaching a democracy. We were an apartheid state until 1965, if you understand what voting means for a political republic. Okay, so from 1965 on, it takes black people like 40 years to go from oppressed and not able to participate in the politics of the society to electing the first black president. Name me another. Like, that's a historic rise, right? That shows that we are not what the media says about us. We are not lazy or shiftless.
Right.
We are deeply committed to politics. We are not apathetic. 40 years from started at the bottom, now we here.
Right.
Then Obama wins again, proving that it wasn't a fluke the first time, proving the strength and power of an unleashed black voting populace. And the first thing that white people did once Obama won again, once they realized it wasn't a fluke, was to take away the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
That's the first thing they did. John Roberts, 2013, Shelby County versus Holder, cuts the Voting Rights Act out of the knees. So before they do any of this other crap that they're doing, before all the other voter suppression ideas, the first thing they had to do is get rid of the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
So when you look at the big picture, and you can say that we have made progress, but I would like to say, and I think TL already mentioned it this way, we've made movement. I don't know that we've made progress.
Right. That's a good way to say it. That's a good way. Yep.
Because as soon as we did start to make progress, white people took the one thing that we needed away from us, and that was the ability to participate. But the law, Voting Rights Act, this is not like Jim Crow. This is exactly what Jim Crow was.
Right.
But now the other side of that, to tease that out a little further, then laws change when something happens and you realize that you need to address something. So, like you said, no one, maybe no one was ingenious enough to think that they would go in and tamper with the right to vote, which they did. So now that you see that happens, now you have to hit the street again. You have to let the folk know what's going on and say, look, we need you to vote, because look at what they're doing in these southern states as far as stripping away the right to vote. So I guess one could also argue that just makes us realize that we have to stay vigilant, because if we relax, then these could be the consequences that happen. So I say all that to say,
but Stace, I'm not going to put that on black people, because let's remember that the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized in 2006 by noted not carer of black people, George W. Bush. He's the one who signed the reauthorization. That passed like 98-0 in the Senate.
Yep.
Black people did not fall asleep at the wheel when it came to the Voting Rights Act. Right. If I'm going to blame black people, I'm going to blame all liberals and all progressives and all Democrats for not taking the Supreme Court seriously.
And that's my point. I wasn't blaming black folks.
I have a question that goes along with that.
Just one last thing. I'm not saying that. I think what I'm saying, Elie, is what you just said. Is not to blame all black folk. It's to make progressive people and woke people, and I hate to use that word, but you understand what I'm saying. People that are understanding how this country works realize that, like I said, you have to stay vigilant and not think that we made progress and now we can relax. But that within itself is not a negative. Go ahead, Nike.
Let me ask this. Now, in saying that, our voter turnout and the different voting laws that they're trying to pass, to keep us from not, showing up at the polls, would it be beneficial for black and brown people to have another political party other than just the same two Bloods and Crips that are already in the the Congress and the White House?
And before you answer, this is where we part ways. Go ahead.
This is what. No, because what I'm saying is, if you look at our system, right, it's all run by the same people. Those teams, those Bloods and those Crips, they're all the same people, and their agendas are similar.
Okay, Elie, let's let
the
Elie
right might be a little bit farther left. I mean, farther right, and the left may be, a little bit farther left. But in reality, they both are doing the same thing, because they get approached. As soon as you get a position in Congress, you get approached by how many lobbyists? Senators, same thing. So we need and this is just my opinion. I believe that we need a political party for minorities and lower class, not lower class, but lower income people.
What do you think, Elie?
So the reason why I disagree with that is because of how our system works, right? In a parliamentary system, like what they have in Canada or England or most countries in Europe, right? What you're saying, TL, absolutely works. You have, there are 18 different parties in Israel, right? The other countries have lots of different parties, and that works because representation in the government is based on a percentage of the vote, right? So if your black party, if your fist in the air party only gets 10% of the vote, That's fine. 10%, you get 10% representation in the legislature, right?
But that
Our
10%
system, and again, this
takes
goes back
away
to
from
the
the
Constitution,
Democratic
it's kind
Party,
of
right?
trash. Our dumbass system is a winner-take-all system. So it doesn't matter if you get 49% of the vote, you get zero representation if the other people get 51% of the vote, right? A good way of thinking about that ridiculous winner-take-allness is to look at where most Black people live, right? Most Black people in this country do not live in New York or California. We're not coastal people. Most Black people still live in the states where our ancestors were enslaved. So the blackest state in the country is Mississippi. The second blackest is Louisiana, right? Like these are the states where that are blackest by population. But as long as white people stick together in those states, the reason why Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana and Georgia are generally red states, despite an overwhelming amount of Black people, is that there's just a little bit more white people. And because we have a winner-take-all system, having plus one white person makes that the whole state is represented by white people, right? So, like, honestly, if you thought about it in a parliamentary system, a state like Mississippi would send 51 delegates that were, Republican and 49 delegates that were Democrat.
And that's also why I think we should use the popular vote and not this.
Sure. Again, but that's
the electoral college.
They don't allow for that, right?
The electoral.
I even disagree with that, though. I mean, I don't
disagree with that.
You don't want the popular vote?
No, I understand.
Electoral college.
Wait, no, because this is why I say that, though, because in our system, the way that it is now, the only way that people in smaller states have any position at all, or the only way that they're heard is because they do have they are represented by their electoral people, their electoral numbers. Meaning, a small state like Rhode Island, if you went strictly popular vote, then the presidents would only go to the largest states, maybe 5 of them. California, they would go to New York, they would go to maybe Pennsylvania. They wouldn't hear the concerns of Montana at all, though, right? Because
no, that's just not okay. That's just not true. Because a couple of ways. One, when was the last time the president went to Rhode Island? When was the last time the president went to Wyoming? So you're thinking about in the primary process, right, where the president has to go. If you're a Democrat running, you have to go to New Hampshire. You got to go to Iowa to win your primary. But in the general election, presidents don't go to Rhode Island. Presidents don't go to Wyoming. Those states are already locked down for their sides. They don't have to fight about them. They only go to the battleground states. So also in the electoral college system, presidents don't go to New York. Presidents don't go to California. Presidents don't go to Texas. They go to Florida. They go to Pennsylvania. They go to Arizona. They go to swing states. So it doesn't help small states or big states. The electoral college focuses on marginal states, right? With marginal populations. That's, again, not the best way of thinking about it, because what it means is that, and you saw this all throughout the Trump era, a Republican president can ignore states that usually vote liberal, like New York and California. A Democratic president can ignore states that usually vote conservatives, like Arizona, like Texas, or Indiana. That means that that depending on the party, entire states get ignored. Whereas if you did it by popular vote, you couldn't write off everybody in California. Do you know? Here's the last way I'll put it. Tell me the state that Trump got the most votes from in 2020. California. The state that he got. Tell me the state that Biden got the second most amount of votes for in 2020. Texas. Republicans in California and Democrats in Texas deserve to have their voices heard too, but they can't have their voices heard when we have an electoral college. So you want to do the primary system state by state by state by state? Fine. I'm willing to do that. But when it comes to a general election, doing it by popular vote is the only way to make sure that everybody's voices are heard, and not just the voices of people in Florida and people in Pennsylvania and people in Michigan.
But is it the case, though, that they can say they can ignore New York because they know what the issues of that large state happens to be, and they know that state typically swings liberal. So they can, and I don't want to use the word ignore. They might not have to go and politic there, but they have to know that state's concerns because it's a liberal state. So imagine it. So okay, so what would happen if they, if to use your word, ignore the concerns of a state like New York, and that liberal state they started sounding too conservative? Then they run the risk of losing that state, though, right? I mean, so
Republican presidents can ignore liberal states, right? So Donald Trump can make it literally. When Trump was president, he was like, "Screw it, let California burn. Let California burn because I'm not going to win.
I'm not going to win that state, right?"
Which A, I mean, that's not something a president should do.
Correct.
But again, B, tons of Republicans in California were getting their crap burnt out. Our presidential election system should not favor presidents ignoring one state or another state because they're not going to win it. Because if it was the reverse, if it was by popular vote and people saw Trump not ignoring a blue state, but saw Trump ignoring people, well, that might hurt Trump, and that's what happened with COVID. I can prove that point, but if you look at what happened with COVID, Trump wasn't able to say COVID is an East Coast problem, a liberal state problem. He tried to at first, but eventually he couldn't say that because it started to kill his own people, and that's when COVID got bad for Trump. I don't think Trump loses without COVID. I think his poor response to COVID had more to do with him losing than any other factor. But it also is it's one of the big reasons why he lost a state like Arizona that he won in 2016, why he lost a state like Michigan which he won in 2016, because he couldn't say COVID is just owning the libs.
Right.
And
so
also,
whereas the wildfires, he could pretend like literally people's property burning to the ground was a lib problem.
Right. Go ahead, TL.
No, I was going to expand on that a little bit and just be like, the popular vote, the election wouldn't be in question if we went by the popular vote. Biden got something like what? 2 million more votes or 4 million more votes.
Can I just interject this? Here's the other problem, right? The Democrat has beaten the Republican in the presidential election for 7 of the last 8 presidential elections. The last since the second Bush, the first Bush term, 7 of the last 8 elections have been won by the Democrat, and yet both parties have spent the same amount of time in the Oval Office.
Now, now I have a question then. So, and you mentioned earlier that the Electoral College is to make sure that the voices of the sideline or the I forgot the word you used, that the minority voices are heard. How would then the issues of someone living in Montana where it might be only 50 people living there, how would their farming and their agricultural concerns be heard if there's only 20 people living in that state? If they have, you know what I mean? At least with
that doesn't have anything to do with the Electoral College.
No. Let me finish my question though. But at least with the Electoral College, Montana might have 2 people that are sent because every state has to have someone sent. Whereas if you go strictly popular vote, again, how would the concerns of those little states be heard and addressed then?
Because those 50
I got 2 responses to that. First of all, if Montana had farming issues, they would have to conglomerate with other farmers. That's how it gets done in democracy. It's not okay for me to sit in my, I've got some special suburban issues up here in New York. I want my voice heard. No, if I want to have my suburban issues heard, I got to partner with other suburbanites in other states. I live in Westchester. I got to partner with suburbanites in Jersey. I got to partner with suburbanites in Long Island to get my voices heard. So why can't a farmer in Montana figure out how they have the same issues as a farmer in Indiana and come together and become a lobby? That's how it's done in a democracy, number 1. Okay. Number 2, there's just, even if I thought that these issues were not going to be voiced, which I don't think, as I've just explained, the idea that the way to fix this is through unequal representation, both in the Senate and the Electoral College. As I said earlier, the way that it's set up right now with their outsized vote is that 1 vote in Montana is worth 58 votes in California.
Right.
That's just not fair. That's just straight up not fair. It's not a democracy. I don't care how we got here. I don't care what special issues they think they have in Montana. It doesn't make them 58 times more important than a person living in California. It just can't do that, right? North Dakota and South Dakota combined get 4 senators and have a smaller population by a factor of 10 than Queens. Queens, right? So you cannot tell me that Queens gets, a 1/19th say in the 2 senators from New York, but both Dakotas can roll up with 4 senators, and now we have a democracy. That's not democracy. That's white rule. And the last thing I'll say about this, the reason why I say it's minority white rule is because, as I've said, Black people are not evenly distributed throughout the country. People of color aren't evenly distributed throughout the country, right? Latinos, they're living in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. Asian people, they're living in California and parts of the East Coast and North Carolina. We're not evenly spread out. There aren't a lot of Black people in Minnesota. There aren't a lot of Black people in the Dakotas. So that structure that values 1 vote in Montana at 58 votes in California, what it's really doing is valuing 1 white vote in Montana at 58 votes in California. I've said for a long time, if I was a liberal billionaire, instead of trying to build a colony on the moon or whatever these people are doing, I would build affordable housing in Montana and move 200,000 people from Queens, New York into palatial estates out in Montana and get me 2 extra senators that way.
That brings me to my next question. Well, I actually have 2 questions, Elie, and I'm seeing how I can intertwine them somehow. The one question I had was, it was about the taking of Black land in your book, and it was talking about, and this is something I had no idea about, and it's one more thing I learned about, from your book, that Seneca Village, the way they took, which was a Black. Well, I'll let you answer more about it. Which the Black community, which they took from these Black people to make Central Park a park where people were living. Do you think that? And I guess this is a 2-parter. Reparations. Do you think it is, first one, is it possible? And why aren't we fighting more to get reparations? We have a GoFundMe actually we're trying to raise money for an attorney for reparations, because we're trying to do this for I don't know the legal system as well in order to pursue something like that, but I do know we need reparations.
So I am a fan of reparations. I believe that reparations are necessary and should be required. I think where people get screwed up with reparations is that it's very complicated to think about how to dole them out. Who to give them to, for what? Like, are you giving just reparations from slavery? That kind of thinks about one kind of harm. But like, if we're giving reparations out, why would we stop the clock in 1865 when there was so much racism and lynching and bombing that happened after 1865 straight up until pretty much the present day? How are you going to give reparations for slavery but not give reparations for the people who got their economy bombed out from the sky in Tulsa, right? How are you going to give reparations to people who got their economy bombed out of the sky in Tulsa but aren't going to get reparations with people who have their families destroyed by redlining or by takings? And that brings me to the point you were making about Seneca Village. One of the things that happens a lot in this country is that whenever the government wants to take your land to build whatever they say they want, sometimes it's a good thing like a hospital, sometimes it's an unnecessary thing like a sports stadium, but whatever it is the government says it needs to build, when it comes to take your land, it's usually taking poor Black people's land and giving them cut rate slum prices for that land, not paying them the full value of the land, and certainly not paying them full value of what the land would be worth after the white people come in and do their quote unquote development, right? So I think that reparations I think that takings are a great way to start thinking about reparations, because there are so many families we have records of who had their land just taken from under them through gentrification processes, through urbanization, revitalization processes, through sports stadiums, through making of parks and beaches. So many Black families who had their wealth taken out of them. Understand that owning a home is still one of the best ways to build generational wealth in this country. And owning a home is exactly what is taken when the government comes and takes your property to build a Central Park or to build a new sports complex, right? So I think takings are a great way to start the conversation of reparations, because it's very easy to see, like, we paid you X amount for the land. The land is actually worth Y.
Right.
Here's
this is what we owe you. Right.
On our webpage,
I have a question.
I have examples of people who have already received reparations from the United States, and my only concern is, like, so Japanese Americans, they've $1.6 billion. What we have, Ottawa Indians, 32 million. Chippewas, they got a settlement. The Soy Indians, the Sioux Indians rather, they got us reparations. Alaskan natives, they got reparations. So what I'm saying, it could be done if they want to do it. They just don't want to do it.
Well, like you said,
I could give them you could cut off, like, if you're migrated to this country, if past a certain date, your qualifications should only be that you're Black, because none of us would even be here if we weren't brought. And there, as far as I know, there's no there's no statute of limitations on human trafficking.
True.
As far as I know.
I have a question now, and I heard you mention this, and I thought it was interesting because you hear it a lot. You said that reverse racism is not real, right? Okay. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, just from a legal standpoint, right? When we talk about racism, what we're really talking about is protected class status. That's a legal term of art. And what it means is that when we look at something like the equal protection laws, we look at them with a view towards the protected classes, right, that have been historically left out of the equal protection of laws. Well, how you define a protected class and who is in a protected class is actually a really complicated legal jargon. The courts are kind of making it up as they go along, but it's certainly Black people. It's certainly new immigrants, Latinos, and what have you. It might be women. Women are kind of quasi-protected class. It might be the LGBTQ community. What it certainly ain't is white people.
Right.
White people themselves are not a protected class, which means that there isn't an equal protection argument, which means there isn't a real racism argument that you can do to them because they're not a protected class. Now, I would be one of the people who would argue that there should be some white people that are protected class. Other people, it's white people who won't agree with me on that, because I'm not saying that you should be a protected class just because you're white. Whiteness is not a protected class. They're in the majority. They're in control. But poverty,
status,
I would absolutely be willing to treat impoverished people, which would include a whole lot of white people. I would totally be willing to treat white people, impoverished white people, as a protected class. It is white Republicans who disagree with me there, so you got to go talk to your boys if you want some protected class. That is not me.
Well, wait, Black, we glazed over the reparations. I just wanted to dig into that a little bit further, because that's something that I generally, believe. Because it would be different if I didn't have examples of this already happening. So why not? Like, why not us? Why should we not have reparations? I mean, because the same way the Indians sued for reparations for their land, we could sue for reparations for our labor. Our labor was forced.
Yeah, people have. There have been lawsuits for people. We talked about it before. There have been people that saw
because, and I can tell you that because I haven't got my reparations check in the mail yet.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that they're successful, but there are folks out there and organizations out there fighting for just that. You
but
know,
there,
I
but
guess
there, it doesn't even have to be a payout. It could be, we shouldn't have, for instance, we shouldn't have to pay taxes in the U.S. We built this country. We shouldn't have to pay taxes.
Well, Elie,
that could be part of our reparations settlement. Or
I like the ideas. My issue is that I'm still trying to get the Supreme Court to agree that white people can't discriminate against me tomorrow.
Right.
Like,
right. It's just so much.
Like,
right.
I would love to get the Supreme Court to agree to give back pay for labor, but I can't get the Supreme Court to agree that I should be allowed to go vote this November without friction, right? So, like, where the court is, you got to remember, the court right now is 6-3 conservative, right? Like, we are, like, and I think a lot of liberals don't understand just how behind we are.
That's right.
Getting the court to agree to any of these ideas is just to me, unless we change the structure of the court, we're getting nowhere.
You think we should add? You think there should be more justices added? Go ahead, Knight. What are you saying?
Here's the thing. Like, you're acting as if the Supreme Court is going to do something because it's the right thing to do, but no, that's not.
That's not the way it works.
How they act. So, like, yes, you can say here's a precedent that you all should agree with, and they can say, yeah, we're not going to look at that. We don't care about that. That's what they're going to say with abortion right now. That's what they're going to say with gun rights. Think about the Muslim ban, right? The Muslim ban was clearly a religious test. It was clearly unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said, I don't care.
Right.
They just I don't care. There are tons of good quality legal arguments you can make, but if 6 conservative justices do not agree with you, then it doesn't matter. Nobody stops them. One of the things that I've tried to get people to understand
system is flawed
through the book is that, like, people understand the power of the first branch of government, of Congress. They understand the power that Congress has. They understand the power the president has, the second branch of government. They don't understand the power that this third branch of government, the Supreme Court, has. It has just as much power as the other two branches. And I argue it has more power than the other two branches because the Supreme Court can veto acts passed by the other two branches, right? So the president can say, okay, everybody gets reparations, and the Supreme Court can say, no, they ain't.
It's unconstitutional. right. So do you think that they should go with, I know they were kicking this around at one time, that they should add additional justices, maybe go to 15?
Yes,
term limits.
Yes, I think we should add 20.
20?
People go, yeah, why is 20? Well, if you think 29 justices are too big, I'll have you know that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, that's the lower court that controls California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Hawaii, they have 29 judges, and they work just fine.
And
so why can't the Supreme Court have 29 justices?
Limits?
I'll tell you what would happen with 29 justices. One, the confirmation process would get a lot better. Because it would be a lot more rote, just replacing people as they come up. It wouldn't be so everybody go to the mattresses. Decisions would get a lot more mainstream. I mean, think about it this way. I made this analogy on some of the other shows, but like, if you've got to get 5 of your friends to go out to dinner, you might go to the club, right? You might go to some places, right?
Oh yeah.
If you got to get 15 of your friends to go out to dinner, you're gonna go to Chili's. You're gonna go to Applebee's. You're gonna do this center mass mainstream thing, right? So if you have more justices, decisions get more mainstream. They get less extreme because getting 15 people is like herding cats on any one issue, right? And the other things that some of these other issues that you're talking about, I heard TL mention term limits, right? Now, I think term limits should be constitutional. Other people think that term limits, you need a constitutional amendment. You know how you get term limits? Give me 20 justices who think term limits are constitutional, and guess what? They're constitutional because the Supreme Court can do whatever it wants.
See, but now, but then when does it end? Why not 40 justices?
Why not? Why not? I mean,
where does it end then?
What? Who cares? Like, here. Okay, so I have a couple of arguments for this, and these are the last. I gotta go. So these are the last two.
Okay. Yes. All right.
One. Right now, conservatives control the court 6-3. If I want to put 10 justices on, let's say, and we get it to be 13-6, and then Republicans come back and they put 10 justices on, and it's 16-13. How is that worse? Right. How is that worse than right now we are behind? If we go 10 and they go 10 and we go 10, and how is that worse than where we are now? Number one. Number two, understand the American Supreme Court is overpowered compared to other countries, right? No other Western industrialized country, other than maybe India, has a Supreme Court nearly as powerful as ours. This power that I was just talking about to veto what the other two branches of government say, that doesn't happen in Canada. The French Supreme Court cannot veto the Prime Minister of France. Are you kidding me? It's our Supreme Court that can do that. So when you say, Stacey, where does it end? If the Supreme Court gets so big that it simply becomes a super legislature, that would actually make it work more like other countries. We would just have a Supreme Court super legislature as opposed to our current legislature.
Wow. Now we see why you're so controversial.
That's right. No, we see why he's the man. Right. That's what.
Absolutely.
Hey, everybody.
In closing,
here's Elie Mystal's book, Allow Me to Retort, on the New York Times bestseller list. I promise you won't be able to put it down.
I saw that.
He's like the black voice that echoes in the cave of whiteness. That's my man, Elie Mystal, and we want you to go out and get the book, and also keep tuning in to MSNBC to check him out. Till one day he's a correspondent.
That's right.
We got to make him official.
Any closing words, Elie? Any closing words for the folks, man?
Man, thank you guys for doing what you're doing. Thank you for bringing the real voice to the people. This is, the reason why I coined the term white-wing media is because we get so much of our news and information filtered through whiteness. One of the reasons why I wrote the book, and one of the reasons why I was very happy to come on your show, is that just talking about what's happening in our country without the white filter, that's actually super important. So thank you guys for what you're doing.
No problem, and thank you for joining us. Don't forget, Terry, you got something in closing? You got something tonight?
Yeah, well, as in always, we thank you guys for coming to our digital neighborhood, and as always, love is the new black.
Once again, y'all, again, thank you, Elie. We really appreciate you taking some time out with us. Don't forget to check them out occasionally on MSNBC. Don't forget to get the book once it's available. You can order it. Allow Me to Retort. We want you to go on YouTube and subscribe. We'll see you back here next week with the weekly podcast, Real Brothers for the Real World in our digital neighborhood.
And the
Thank you very
podcast
much,
can
y'all.
be found on all major outlets, wherever you get your podcast.
Elie, thanks again, man. Be safe out there. We'll be talking to you.
Peace out, guys.
Elie, thanks a lot.